Whenever I share something God has done in my life, or simply tell people about Jesus, I keep noticing the same pattern. I don't know if you've experienced this too, but I usually see three different kinds of reactions. The first group listens politely and then says, "It's just not for me." The second group responds with something like, "That's interesting, maybe we can talk about it another time." And then there is a third group. They say, "That's really interesting, I'd like to hear more. I need to think about whether this could be true for me as well." In my experience, that third group is by far the smallest. I think the Apostle Paul experienced exactly the same thing when he spoke about Jesus in Athens, the intellectual and philosophical center of the ancient world. In today's Impulse, we read, "When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them began to sneer, but others said, 'We want to hear you again on this subject.'" What I find fascinating is that Paul wasn't discouraged by any of these reactions. He never expected everyone to believe immediately. He understood that people are on different journeys. Some close their hearts, some remain curious but undecided, and some begin to search for the truth. That is exactly why it is worth talking about our faith. Our goal is not to win arguments or pressure people into believing. Faith cannot be forced. What we can do is simply share what Jesus Christ has done in our lives. We can tell our story with honesty, humility, and love. What others do with that story is ultimately between them and God. Sometimes a single conversation changes a person's life forever. Sometimes it takes years before a seed begins to grow, and sometimes we don't see any visible result at all. But God often works quietly, long after the conversation has ended. A sentence that seems forgotten today may return to someone's heart years later at exactly the right moment. So don't lose heart if people respond differently than you hoped. Our responsibility is not to change people, that is God's work. Our responsibility is simply to point people to Jesus with kindness, sincerity, and hope.